The truth is inside of us, and it's wonderful when we have the courage to tell it.
Talking came before writing. Writing came before grammar, and grammar came before literature. The most ancient form of sharing ideas or describing something to another was in the method of vocal cords mixed with fluctuation of sound coming from our mouths. It's actually a miraculous ordeal if you consider the fact that with our very mouths, we can extrapolate enormous ideas of inventions, or better yet, brainstorm as a group to build state-of-the-art infrastructures. It reminds me of one of the most infamous construction sites that have ever been organized, second to the creation of the pyramids. It was a devised blueprint from a skilled hunter who also was a king during his days. He was well renowned. His name was Nimrod, and the assembly of builders who were from all parts of the world spoke the same language, manifested the Tower of Babel. More about it can be read in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, if you desire. Everything we see and use has once been a prisoner in the mind of a human being. This is what truly separates us from the insects, domestic, and wild animals. Driven by instinctive desires without logical reasoning abilities, animals have their own distinct system of communicating. Crickets create a monotonous sound to appeal to one another. Birds chirp to distinguish their own groups. You know that saying, birds of a feather flock together? Essentially, it's an attempt to illustrate how those who share the same mindset tend to gravitate to each other collectively. They remain in their groups. No one who isn't similar or in behavior is accepted. Regularly, they are overlooked without any thought. Marine mammals like humpback whales emit an energetic underwater sound in the form of a whistle. They also can create screeching sounds. The point is that every living organism has its form of understanding. Sometimes we see animals of completely different families mingling, but this is usually within a controlled environment, like an animal shelter. God made some animals to be independent. Anyone who is keen to the feline species is familiar with this quite well. Try calling your pet cat by the name you have given it, without any enticing motivations. There's a level of skill with speech. You have to have intelligence and awareness if you want to become better with expressing yourself. We all have learned in school the proper way to use grammar, but how many truly pay attention in school? Most of the things learned are not applicable to real life. 90% of students will not go in their memory bank to use algebraic expressions when everything we do encompasses basic mathematics. The only logical literature skills we need to learn is being able to write a full sentence, your own name, and understanding words when written or spoken. Here's an interesting fact. The etymology of the word educate means to lead out or bring forth in Latin. Well, if you look at our system of education and what it has produced over the past 40 years, it has brought forth more people in debt to the government rather than bringing more studious people into the world of labor. Getting back to speech, you can drastically see the difference in how we used to use language 100 years ago or even 50. It was with elegance and clear descriptions. Not much slang or vulgarities were being used because that generation held priority in reading and writing, which ultimately enhanced their diction to speak without miscommunicating. I think not having access to other peripherals like the enormity of the internet made this a possibility for them. Formalities are still in play even when you think they are not. If you are at a wedding, at a resort, meeting new people, or received an invitation to a wine tasting event from a friend, you will use more of a resonating voice as you converse with peers and associates. Be wise in how you behave in front of others, because that's the impression that will leave a mark. It's remarkable how many disregard this fact. How you present yourself to the world is the true depiction of your self-worth. In other words, a man or woman will actually tell you who they are by what they are in front of you. This is all forms of communication without a doubt, no other way around it. It's an informal indicator, but nevertheless, it is a sign or a signal. When we go outside and decide to walk down the street, there lies a signpost to give warning, direction, or instruction. Clear, concise, and straightforward. There is no error unless you fail to adhere to the meaning of the sign due to your own negligence or mischievousness. No one will be at fault but you. If you dare to disobey the rules of the road, then you have subjected yourself to the rules of breaking them. Consequences must follow. Have you ever had to experience not fully comprehending what someone has said to you? I have, and I'm sure you have also. Most often, people tend to speak too fast and think others should understand them. No one can understand a full-blown run-on sentence. There has to be a cadence, a rhythm, or smoothness. Enunciation is vital. I believe the combination of pronunciation and implementation will improve the effectiveness of your enunciation. I think you should try it. Nothing to lose. If anything, it'll make you more appealing and attractive. Good speech is like having clean teeth, because nobody prefers a mouth that's unkempt, nor is it pleasing at all. Think for a moment. Isn't it uncomfortable to be around individuals who are always using words that are derogatory, putting people down with belittling comments? What benefit is it to you or anyone else to remain in company with such people? Words are powerful, and they can inflict harm both psychologically and emotionally. Sometime when I was a young boy growing up in the 90s, there was this chant that my peers and the elders would say during a verbal altercation. It stated, "Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words would never hurt me." Those growing up in the inner city of the west side of Chicago can understand what I mean, but this was also used in other urban cities. Let's get this straight. Words can hurt you as much as stones and bricks. Now, of course, words cannot do any physical harm, but it's the projected form of infliction. Violence can start the moment someone insults another. Romantic partners can become physically ill or emotionally distressed when the words "we need to talk" are mentioned. That's why verbal abuse is overlooked most often. It doesn't appear to be much of a threat until actions have followed. Even Jesus made reference to the importance of words and speech. He was amongst the crowds and his disciples when he said, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach." We've all met someone who cannot be relied upon by their choice of words, although they may seem to be sincere. They tend to be disingenuous and lackadaisical. These sorts of people are usually preoccupied with alternative agendas. A man or a woman should have the decency to speak with the intent of conveying what is desired to be expressed. Why waste time with jargon or speaking without clarity? It's fruitless to embark on such a task. Don't believe me? Try talking to a fool. There is always a certain aspect of timing with conversation. Sometimes we must be formal, and other times you must be informal, as in speaking around a familiar face or family who know you. I think the most undervalued thing we do as human beings is try our best to be persuasive in speech because we want that gratification of attention. Attention that's vain and bring forth reassurances that are not healthy. It's enlarging the black hole within the soul of an individual who seeks attention from strangers of any kind. Any form of expressing oneself can be seen as a form of signaling. Children with bad conduct will exhibit erratic behavior because they don't know how to properly articulate how they feel. It's a byproduct of communicating through body language, which I will speak about later in this audio. But however, your actions are an association to how you communicate what is internal to the world outwardly. It takes a lot of maturity and self-awareness to acknowledge your own patterns of behavior. The people who have this skill are extremely rare, but yet sophisticated in how they present themselves to the general public. They are out there, living respectful lives and telling the world aesthetically who they are without uttering one word. You know, you can learn a great deal from just by a person's way of speaking. It's a sure way of identifying their social class or lack thereof. Even me, with this audio, I can be heard and immediately be labeled smart, intelligent, or dumb and simple-minded. No one person is exempt. One of the 12 disciples, named James, wrote this: "With the tongue we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness." That last portion I want to bring attention. I repeat, who have been made in God's likeness. How often do we quickly resort to confrontational words when we are angry or want to be the center of attention by acting childish? Most people need clinical therapy, but very few will ever consider it a wise thing to do. They prefer to be persistent with the dysfunction without care of who they are hurting verbally. I'm an advocate for everyone, in the sake of good health, whether mentally or physically, but when a person is delusional, it's like trying to extinguish a fire with lighter fluid. Eventually, they will blow up. Blessings and curses are in the power of the tongue. This should not be so. James 3:10. This is to say that your words or manner of speaking can greatly impact the outcome of your own life. You can curse yourself and others, or you can have your wits about you to speak with respect, which will bless. A woman was given a bouquet of blooms from her employer because of her stellar performance. Being overwhelmed with joy and satisfaction, after her shift was over, she took them home, but didn't know what to do with all of these flowers. She asked her fiancé for any ideas, but he could only think of putting the plants into a pot to help them grow. So she agreed, seeing that it was a good idea, and she began to set the family of plants spatially throughout their apartment. This was an average woman with average knowledge of plant care. She didn't know much more than just providing water to the soil every now and then, and a little sunlight by the occasional opening of the curtains. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her fiancé told her that some of the plants are turning brown. She then began to investigate how to revive the color back to the plants that seemed to be dying. After her quick stint of research, she read from a biophilia expert that plant life are organisms that can restore themselves by simply speaking to them positively. The woman applied this method alongside regular water and sunlight, and within 1 week, the flowers have returned 80% of their color. They stood more upright too. Rachel O'Kell, horticulturalist and founder of the Sydney-based plant consultancy business, Our Green Sanctuary, said, "I often talk to my plants when I'm looking at them." Then she added, "I get excited when there is new growth. It means they are happy and I'm doing all the right things." The question here is, can your favorite type of plant that's drooping over like a teenager who has been grounded be affected by gentle encouragement or harsh ridicule? Well, they answered this question too. Lead researcher of Plant Life Balance and Dr. Dominique Hess said, "I think relationships are key here, whether it is how you speak or you notice they need water or new soil or nutrients. Tone is also important, given they respond to vibrations." When you come within proximity of another person, you begin to run through a quick checklist. You are looking for potential threats or anything that warrants your safety. This is not an insult to anyone, but it's about being cautious. Not everyone can be your friend, nor is this the way God intended it. There's a reason why God only chastises those whom he loves. Meeting new people is a risk. Like anything else in this life we coexist in. We all need a sense of belonging. We are made to mingle, talk to one another, and intermix culturally. There were 12 tribes of Israel, and the most intermixed tribe was a tribe called Ephraim. The good book stated, "Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned." It's just more proof of how racism is a construct created from the basis of hate, because God doesn't have a preference of skin complexion that he loves more than another. I suggest reading that content in the book of Hosea. But nonetheless, we thrive from interpersonal relationships. It's how you and I were pushed through the womb of our mothers. Before we were born, there were attractions and chemical alterations happening between the two biologies. Do you believe that men and women are only physically attracted to the opposite sex by itself? Well, this cannot be true, because if a person was initially attracted by the appearance, then why did they lose that sexual appeal when they discovered unpleasant things about the individual? Body language is equally as important as the overall presentation of a human being. There's just other characteristics that we take into account. A homeless man may look unpleasant in all retrospect, but if his demeanor is strong and with maturity, there's a shift in perspective for that particular person. He may not be physically attractive today or for another year, maybe even for a longer time, but there's a possibility that he will become unrecognizable the day his confidence and poise has paid off. The odds are stacked against the senses of people when it comes to making changes. If anyone makes a genuine effort to do so, they will have joined the rarity group of peers in self-development. Did you know that the way you stand can give off a certain thing about you? For example, a woman can see a handsome man. She may approach him gradually or indirectly, but when that man starts displaying bad posture, immaturity, or gesturing in a way that's not conducive to masculinity, because she's a heterosexual being, she will immediately be less invigorated to attempt greeting the man due to her visual cues of his nonverbal communication. The way we stand on our 2 feet has an effect on who gravitates to us, or for the insecure people, those who are intimidated by it. Folding your arms can showcase seriousness in the form of anger or irritation. It can also represent a shield of defense due to being uncomfortable by others who are not even a threat. It's a self-esteem issue, a psychological disorder in extreme cases. An article by BetterHelp was created to inform readers of the types of nonverbal cues. It's an interesting read. It stated that the way your feet are positioned details whether you have a self-doubt issue or the aura of power. It's pretty prevalent with sports. Players often take advantage of the opposition by their weak defense or bad positioning based on their stance. King Solomon said it the most precise in regards to this topic. He said, "A wise person chooses the right road, a fool takes the wrong one. You can identify fools just by the way they walk down a street. This is true, and it cannot be refuted. A drunkard can be easily noticed anywhere. A loyal spouse is praised. A prostitute or whore cannot be disguised by her sophistication and impeccable ways of using vocabulary because her attire incentivizes her to be open to sexual favors. The generation of women today have condoned this type of apparel, and by doing so, they are inadvertently telling lustful men and homosexual women that they are readily available to commit to sexual fulfillments, whether consensual or not. Money and sex are the 2 most urged desires. If a person doesn't have the decency to obtain these things in a respectful manner, then this is why we have murder, robbery, and sexual assaults. You can identify people just by their characteristics and what values they stand on. The way you use the muscles in your face is an expression of communication. When you smell something foul and out of bounds, your face frowns up in disgust, signaling how unpleasant the experience was. Same thing with every other experience we encounter throughout our lifetime when it comes to tasting flavor or just an end result of a visual stimulant. No one just becomes inanimate, just like a department store mannequin, when an old lady falls down or during a pleasant commute driving by an unfortunate car accident. Watching a UFC fight reveals all of these types of facial gymnastics. I would also lump in that being an avid movie enthusiast can display the entire spectrum as if someone has used every single emoji or emoticon that is accessible. You can make it an experiment at your home by keeping track of how many times your facial expressions change during a TV show or movie of your choice. Seems like the teenagers and some adults these days are deliberately choosing to express themselves in this way through text messages while decreasing their ability to use words as a means of description. They fail to have the skills to orally communicate, which is why most people are misunderstood or simply just sound stupid because of the lack of being effective in their native language. Sadly, it's the way of the future, unless reinforcements begin to intervene somehow. It will take a world effort to do this, but again, you must accept that it's extremely rare that people will do the inner work to first see within themselves the need to change before change can eventually happen. This is why 65% of the world is fat, based on the data from the World Health Organization. It's because there's no discipline. It's important to have the awareness to decipher the faces people make. I'm not talking about deformity or birth defects, because that's not a voluntary ordeal. They are born that way, and that is God's will and shouldn't be thought of as something bad. God created the lame person as well as the poor person, but we never think to question the creation of a healthy or rich person. We just believe that everyone should be that way without any afflictions or abnormalities. God made them both for His purposes, and your job on earth is to discover what purpose you are supposed to journey on instead of following lustful desires majority of the time. If you resort to being humble a little more, I think things will tilt more in your favor. Having situational awareness is an intuitive way you would be able to interpret the distinctive facial expressions with some level of intelligence. Then you can act accordingly. It's passive data that will provide you with subtle evidence to refrain from probable harm or being in an opportunity to aid or care for someone. Obviously, you want to have precaution, whether you decide to act on such information or not, because this world has raised some magnificent deceivers. So, my best suggestion, as the great teacher said, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Our voice and their inflections play a role in how feelings are interpreted while we are speaking. A psychologist, Alex Lickerman of the University of Chicago said, "Whatever the content of the things we say, it's our tone that communicates what we're feeling when we say them." That's true, and it's a vital detail in conversation that brings life to what we tell a friend, business partner, or romantic counterpart. We don't speak as if we're robots, you know. We are human, and we have personalities that encompasses our culture and backgrounds. However, speed, clarity, tone, and volume all have their part in how we understand one another. A judge representing the judicial court will not use diluted communication when making a verdict. A great-grandfather might speak slower and with less projection, but his words are still understood because of the tone of his voice. In Germany, a group of researchers wanted to know if our voices have any attachment to our personalities. Over 2,000 participants took a survey, and the results were gathered up. The spokesman said this: "We know pretty soon whether we're talking to a man, a woman, a child, or an older person. We can pick up on whether the person sounds interested, friendly, sad, nervous, or whether they have an attractive voice. We also start to make assumptions about trust and dominance. There is much validity there, and I would agree. The voice is distinctive. It's our identity. So much so that it's like a fingerprint that cannot be duplicated even if you are one of two identical twins. A deep, rich baritone voice that can be heard so clearly is the preferred choice of any woman you know. The notion of power, strength, wisdom, and maturity are all characteristics that appeal to the lower class women as well as the higher class. They sense dominance without even seeing the person at all. The opposite is true with men. Men prefer soft-spoken, youthful, and charming characteristics in the vocals of women. Immediately upon hearing the voice of someone, you can quickly decide whether you are engaged or turned off. We all will get old, and as we get old, so does the way we speak. Whoever is speaking, there lies a recognizable pitch for how we analyze what someone is telling us. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Have you heard that before? Does it make sense to you? There's much truth behind it, you know. The tone of your voice depicts how your message is received. It's something that can be inviting or a deterrent. Remember what the doctor said about tone of voice? It is the relationship between the sound and the vibration that's being projected. It is the means to understand good or bad energy. Whichever one you are most frequent tends to attract the outcomes of what you put out there. As a man soweth, he also must reap it. That's why it's not surprising for the circumstances that people find themselves in, or even the predicament of their lifestyle. Truth of the matter is that low-income and demoralized communities use vocabulary that keeps them in bondage. Every other word is either inserted with profanity or simply sounding dyslexic. There are a rarity of uplifting conversations that can be had in such an environment, but a person doesn't have to remain in that state of being. If you look at flourishing communities, they are clearly distinguished by their residents. They are your lawyers, doctors, real estate agents, or teachers, sometimes even professional athletes. This is not concrete, but only an example of insinuated income and the people that live in the neighborhood. It's highly likely that these types of people have greater capabilities with the use of words. They're able to be more descriptive and proficient in language without any obscurities. Also, the use of profane words are at a minimum, to say the least. Tone, volume, and pitch are one and the same, but let's not forget about the intelligence aspect too. The Lord said, "A fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards." I'll tell you this. The moment you think to say anything will be the moment you display your level of academics. It's often said that confidence can be shown in the pattern of which one speaks. This can be said for those who are insecure about their ability to choose choice words, but it's a correlation that can't go unnoticed. Public speakers have to have developed some type of skill to overcome being timid or unsettled as the attention from the crowd focuses on them. It's the same thing with musicians, actors, and actresses. If you are insecure about yourself to the degree in which it overtakes you, then you would negatively affect the way you communicate to others. Signs like a crackling voice or stuttering are a couple examples of lack of confidence in oral communication. This doesn't apply to those who have been diagnosed with a mental disorder or a speech impediment, because that's a different thing. I'm talking about your average man or woman and their self-awareness of how they are portrayed. How many of us have had to pull a tooth during our childhood? Remember how it was an annoyance, unsettling experience, and a little fearful because of the perceived pain? Here are some wise words. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. This is how one feels when they lack power, self-discipline, or they are discontent in their own skin, typically living a life of perpetuated self-doubt. Horrible way to exist. They are not reliable, nor are they considered dependable based on their irrationality or uncertainty. To have confidence in such a person will feel like a broken tooth because of the chronic pains of inconsistency. A double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. Listening to a person who is insecure or quick-tempered to speak is the same way. Don't be fooled. Angry people are simply individuals who either are frustrated because they think they deserve to be right all the time, or they have failed the mission of accepting who they are in comparison to the world. The reason why I said that having a speech impediment is a different issue altogether is because there are different spectrums of severity with that, and I'm not a doctor or clinical psychologist to speak on such matters in length. But what I will say is that power and leadership skills can overlook this. You may have problems with actually conveying your thoughts in form of interpreted audio, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have qualities to lead. Moses, whom we all are too familiar with, or should be, took the role of leading close to 1 million Israelites out of Egypt towards the Promised Land. He was not an eloquent speaker, but a man who stumbled when doing so. His presence and posture was that of a captain or warrior. After all, he did crush a rock with his bare hand. That's impressive regardless if you know the ancient ways of the Shaolin monk or karate. We live in an era where transgender and body mutilations are at its highest, which proposes a lot of discrepancies. It's confusing for the most part to see a complete painting on the human body when it would have been much more appropriate to put it on a canvas and sell it for a profitable margin. Hearing a voice that resonates more with the male, but yet you see a figure that appears to be a woman is bizarre. It's a nightmare. A lot of women who change their behaviorisms to mimic masculine traits cannot be missed either. No matter what, the voice is our identity, and it's a part of our biological makeup, as well as our features. No surgery or artificial creation will remove this. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. Anyone can choose to be pleasant and friendly. It's an easy thing to do. No harm in saying hello. Sometimes it could be the thing to break the ice, so to speak. Generally, we all enjoy a nice compliment every once in a while. It's captivating when someone deliberately points out the style we may have, the fragrance we are wearing, our voice, manners, or any of the numerous things. I've witnessed the mood of a person change when I told a man how good of a father he was to his son. Surprisingly, he began to display a happier and chipper spirit. I can tell that his 1-year-old son could sense the sudden rush of euphoria as well. Giving a sincere compliment actually brings this unexpected joy within yourself. Have you ever given a compliment without intending to receive one in return? When the person offered to say something nice to you, didn't you feel a boost in your self-esteem? Perhaps you felt you were not invisible after all. In either case, you were positively affected and inspired. A small compliment can mean the entire world. It can change the total perspective or trajectory for anyone. It goes along with the infamous words, life and death are in the power of the tongue. A life can be destroyed by unwanted bullying or insults. It can send a person to their grave prematurely. It can also ignite a spark which produces healthy and prosperous conditions. Words can build up or tear down, and it doesn't take many but a few. A good example is the quote, "Let your words be few, because the Lord sits high in heaven, and we sit low on earth." It's the power in what we communicate that holds influential substance. A teacher telling a student good job can promote further scholastic achievements. Giving praise propels the recipient in a fashion that he or she most likely will persist in, whether good or bad. Anything you serve will be your master eventually. It's just a matter of how much you're feeding one over the other in that sense. I think it goes without saying how a woman thrives from a good compliment. It's a reassurance of her decisions. Men should be giving their spouses and girlfriends compliments frequently because it is the lifeblood of keeping the health of the relationship in good standing. It makes for a more vibrant dynamic. As the man, you are the vocal leader, the commander, who guides, and the woman will follow you because she can't help but do so. A woman is made for a man, but men are not made for women, although they give birth. They are the weaker vessels and should be cherished. Those who are worthy, of course. A simple acknowledgement of the hair, skin, body part, a small token of appreciation in the morning or night before bed will do more good than damage. The woman will eventually begin to return the favors back to you. See how much the man's chest will stick out when you add special attention to his ego. It's a hand-in-hand business, and the benefits are enormous. Give it a shot and see how the beauty between your relationship will become. I say that the intimate connection with you both will gradually improve, including how you communicate. Now, I'm no brainiac or breaking the IQ scale with inconceivable numbers, but those women who are young, gorgeous, and throwing pom-poms around at sporting events can send an exuberant jolt in the athlete's performance. Even in the corporate world of business, a prestigious woman changes the posture of the men who are her onlookers. Notice how women are extremely attracted to a man who is financially secure, stoic, and has a great physique. Women do anything in their power to be selected by such a man. They are motivated to put on their best face and attire. You see, men are inspired by women, and women become enamored with men. Romantic relationships often start with much flirting because it's the infatuation we seek. Sometimes this phase does not wear off, and people remain stuck in this cycle thinking they are in love. Once the flirtation has come to a halt, you begin to divulge a little bit more information about yourself to the significant other, sparingly. It wouldn't be healthy just to express everything about yourself at once. It would be crazy to do that unless you are extremely desperate. If you are desperate to be with anyone who is still a stranger, you might want to investigate the benefits of clinical therapy. Communication in all forms of relationships are vital, and we will always have this as our basis to doing things. Since the beginning of the ages, it's been this way, and it has worked well for us so far. It's about being relatable and understood. Can you imagine a mute trying to explain a complex matter to you without voice and words to match? I'll tell you. It will be like a mime doing his best impressions to illustrate to you the effects of an explosion. Our only intention is to get our point across, to be heard, to have commonality. With the use of language, we can come together to formulate insurmountable inventions. Also, we can create catastrophes in the same breath. The best form of speaking to each other is in a form of humility. Doing it this way presents less strain and can open up the door of forgiveness in the event of being scorned. The bottom line is that without proper awareness and skills to articulate yourself in this vast world of technology and social media personalities, you can be trapped in the bubble of insecurity. It's your job to become a better communicator, whether you are using your cell phone texting feature or through a phone call conversation. Remember, being understood is the key, and most oftenly as humans, we tend to be vague in our dialects rather than speaking with clarity or small talk. The root word in communication is communion. The word in itself implies that we are to be more integrated and mixed. We are all a part of the same race, and it has nothing to do with your pigmentation or complexion. Every person that ever lived and alive today has always been a part of the human race. Anything else is complete ludicrous because we all bleed the same and we all have similar anatomies. Heaviness in the heart of a man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. A man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it? Out of everything I said here, I like for you to remember two things. 1, let your nays be nay and your yes be yes. And 2, let your conversation be without malice and bitterness, but that of which will edify. Thank you.
The truth is inside of us, and it's wonderful when we have the courage to tell it.